It's that time of year when the word new pops up at the start of just about every sentence or phrase. New presents, which you got at Christmas. New gadgets, which you also got at Christmas. New beginnings. New year. New resolutions. New Talk of the Trinity podcast.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity, a momentous edition because it is the last one of 2021, or depending on when you're listening and watching this, the first one of 2022, depending on what you have been doing in the run-up to New Year's Eve. Although probably in the only way I'm ever going to be able to compare myself to professional sports people, I am currently doing the Steven Gerrard. As in, I am splendidly isolating due to the wonderful world of COVID. But I am not letting that stop me or my co-host, Will Forrest, joining me as always, bringing you the latest in all things Villa on our YouTube page at Talk Trinity. Whilst you're on the YouTube page, have a look at one of the shiny subscription buttons, which, due to the wonders of modern technology, my finger is maybe going to be somewhere going towards it on the left and right hand side, which is basically a reason to never let me do technological links. But in terms of hit the subscribe button, you get to know when we release all our videos before anybody else. And if you've done that already, you've spent the last few days devouring our transfer window part 1 special, where we were joined by all our special guest stars: Connor Sherry, Dave of the Irish Lions, Liam of the Qatar Lions, Russell of the Cayman Islands Lions. I don't think I've missed anybody. Apologies if I have. I mean, me and Will were there. You know, we were just facilitating the discussion. Or on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity. Keep up to date with all the latest views, opinions, polls that we're running. And if you're listening to us on one of our podcast providers, then you know all about Spotify, Amazon, Google, Stitcher, some other ones that I will let my co-host recap at the end when we're bringing this all to a magical conclusion. Tenuous link into magical conclusions. It was a great start on Boxing Day when Chelsea came to town, but wasn't quite the magical conclusion or the magic on Christmas that we were wishing for, as it finished Villa 1, Chelsea 3. Over the disappointment yet, Will?
Yeah, over it quite quickly, to be honest with you. No, not over it quite quickly. I thought we'd win. I thought we'd get a 2-1 win. I thought Chelsea would be a bit more depleted than we saw. I thought that we would be as well. You know, it was only McGinn, Young and Gerrard, really, who were noticeable absentees from the match day team of people who would be there. Always like Reece James. What a cracking header that was as well.
Training ground special, that was.
Mate, caught Mendy out, didn't he? But Mendy gets caught out from left-wing efforts and crosses at the moment. And then they just made a substitution of a £100 million player, amended their tactics, and Lukaku bulldozed us, didn't he, really? I think we went a bit too defensive as well in that second half, especially to start with, when you could see Ings, Watkins and Buendia at least 10 yards back inside our own half, trying to defend against the Chelsea centre-backs. You're sort of thinking, come on, lads, go and put some pressure on and get away from them. First half, Douglas Luiz was putting through 1, 2, 3, 50, 49, 5,000 great through balls for Ollie Watkins to get onto. We were actually attacking them. And then it sort of went kaput, really, in the second half.
Yeah, it was almost the opposite to recent games we've had against the bigger teams. Man City, in particular, springs to mind, and Leicester, whereby the first half was very good, and then we got going in the second. Whereas you mentioned the tactical change and the substitution from Chelsea at half time flipped it on its head in terms of we were a better team. I hesitate to use that because I think if you looked at trifling things such as possession and shots, then Chelsea maybe were ahead of us in the first half. But I think you could see we had a game plan, and that the game plan was working in the first half. I mean, Gerrard, you mentioned, wasn't on the sideline, but you could see his tactical imprint all over that performance. That the thing, it's not exactly a surprise for a Gerrard team, but the pressing, and not just the every single ball we're just going to run after kind of aimlessly. It was calculated pressing. There were some times where we let Chelsea with the ball. I mean, we've talked about it previously. I mean, even from the first game against Brighton, there were areas of the pitch where we were quite happy to let Brighton have the ball. In that game, their two centre-backs had the most passes out of anybody on the field because we let them have it there. But they didn't do anything to us because we were pressing in the right areas. And in the first half, it was encouraging to see that even against one of the top teams in the country, in Chelsea, we were able to do that pretty well in terms of we're only going to get better with time the more, well, where we can get everybody in the training ground kind of allowed in at the same time. It's only going to get better. But in the first half, it was positive for me in terms of that intelligent play. And I think there's been maybe a criticism of Dean Smith at the end was there wasn't enough of a tactical plan. It was just get players on the field. We got attacking players. When we get the ball, kind of Volta. Is it Volta Street on FIFA? Kind of, that kind of in the cage. Just let you have an attack and then we'll go and have an attack. Gerrard has been a bit more tactical discipline, and that was evident in the first half, I thought, against Chelsea. And that was good to see. I mean, you look in terms of the players who weren't available, especially McGinn, you got to feel that he would have been a real difference maker again. Could say perhaps a bit much, but obviously Sanson hasn't played a lot of football. First half, I thought it was neat and tidy, played quite well. Second half, I think you could tell the game was beginning to kind of catch up with him a bit. And like the rest of the team, as you mentioned, a bit of a retreat back. But you can have all the best tactics in the world, but sometimes you just need a good bit of psychological fear. And you mentioned Lukaku comes on at half time. His record against Villa, I think he's scored more goals against Villa than anybody else.
Everyone else.
Yeah. And it looked to me as if the defence knew it when he came on. I mean, in terms of there'd been a bit of a brain freeze in the first half from Matt Cash, I think the penalty. I think we've had debates about whether penalties against Villa have been fair or unfair. Liverpool springs to mind. I don't think there's any debate about the Cash one. It's a penalty. I thought it was pretty, as you put on the Twitter feed, Cash was rash. It was. Yeah. It was a pretty needless tackle, I think. And it was one whereby I think even if you get the ball, you might struggle not to give away penalties. You've gone through the back of somebody, in terms of this 2021 kind of interpretation of the rules. But yeah, I think it was a tackle that didn't need to be made. So you've already kind of got that and let Chelsea back into the game. But ended the first half okay. Lukaku comes on, and I think there was just a feeling in the Villa back line of, oh dear, just give him the goal now. And in terms of Lukaku's first goal, there's been debate, I think, amongst Villa fans in terms of whether it was just great centre-forward play. Lukaku, I think there's a bit of a cliche about Lukaku. That's what he does. He's just a physical guy in the air. That's not really the main facet of his game, I would say. But was it just Lukaku doing one of the things he's been demonstrating, or was it poor defensive play from Mings? I think that's been a debate amongst the Villa faithful. What's your view on that particular debate, Will?
Well, you know my admiration for Tyrone Mings, as do our listeners as well. I'll always defend him. I think he's a very good defender who doesn't get the plaudits he deserves, but people are quite quick to jump on him when he makes a mistake. And I've got to be honest with you, he didn't cover himself in glory for that goal. The fact he sort of turned away and into Lukaku, you'd have preferred to have seen him jumping over him, trying to win the ball or nipping in front of him, wouldn't you? I mean, it's a clever run from Lukaku, but it's what you expect. But Mings, he just didn't do enough for me for that goal. And it's interesting seeing on Twitter that some fans saying that, well, what Chelsea do is they put balls into dangerous areas and get the players to run to them, such as with that goal, whereas Villa tried to pinpoint a pass to a player who's in a dangerous area rather than getting them running onto the ball. That was demonstrated there, really. Going back to the Matty Cash tackle, I was watching the game at home, my wife and my brother-in-law watching it as well with me, and straight away I went, what on earth are you doing? And one of them said, being a plonker. Like, them watching the game as well. It's just like, you're an absolute idiot, Cash. Why on earth have you jumped in and taken out the back of his legs in that area? There was no need for it. We weren't in any major danger. Okay, the cross comes in. No. You're a bit concerned. But Konsa was in between the player and where the ball was going to go as well. It was a little bit silly. I agree about the psychological factor with Lukaku, not just because he scored 84 million goals against us and all he has to do is look at the goalkeeper and the ball's gone past him. You look at the first half and you see the way we were set up. And a lot of the time it seemed as though it was Konsa and Mings in defence on their own. Douglas Luiz just in front of them. Sanson and Ramsey had pulled right out wide to sort of the touch lines, really, a lot of the time. And then you had Cash and Targett pretty much playing as a front five with Buendia, Ings and Watkins. And it pinned back those Chelsea wing-backs a lot. We obviously felt that with them having Pulisic up front, that he wasn't going to offer as much as Lukaku would, which they were right about. Yep. And it allowed us to have that bit more creative freedom and we didn't have to fear their attacks as much, whereas in the second half, we very much went back to a back four. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed as though we went for our midfield three and then Buendia sort of appeared to operate behind Watkins and Ings. So it's more of like a 4-3-1-2, a classic Football Manager favourite formation from years gone by. Yep. But it wasn't good enough. We need to stick to that 4-3-2-1 and the Christmas tree, if you like, and play that formation. We're suited to it. We've got good players who can fit into those positions. Sanson, quality against Chelsea. No babyish behaviour when he came off either. I think he knew he was spent, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he
knew
he'd been in the game.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the players that we brought on, and of all of them, and Liam from the Qatar Lions will be happy with me saying this. Why we brought El Ghazi on, I don't know. He doesn't really suit that formation. Maybe we changed to a 4-2-3-1 right at the very end. Traore was the type of player to bring on. He was brought on a bit too late. And Chukwuemeka was the type of player to bring on. And he looked confident again. It's those sort of players who get in between the lines and don't really have a set position. They get on the ball and they go where they want to go. And you think, all right, you've got the ball now. Do what you can do. Those are the sorts of players that we need to create chances for Watkins or Ings, whichever one it is that plays up front.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the tactical shape, in the first half, I think we did catch Chelsea a bit by surprise. Second half, they adjusted. And I agree with you. I think we did get a bit too narrow. Buendia, I think especially in the second half. You want him to be trying things, as we've talked about previously. You want him to try and get the confidence up. But the more the game went on, it did seem for Buendia in a cycle of more things weren't coming off. So he was trying more things weren't coming off. And he just kind of kept going into that descent, really. And I agree with you in terms of if you're in that situation whereby the opposition is establishing their foothold in the game, dominating as Chelsea were in the second half, you want to bring on your flair players, your bit of trickery, your bit of. Sometimes they don't even know what they're doing, so the defense isn't going to know. And yeah, Traore, Chukwuemeka, players to come on. I think it's a glass half full, glass half empty scenario. First half, very good tactical plan, took Chelsea by surprise. The great managers like Tuchel, they adapt, and they did at half time, change shape, change players. Can you then react to the reaction? And I mean, Chelsea, the European champions, we're mid-table in the Premier League, so I don't think it can be a realistic expectation that we're going to be beating the top teams every week. But it's a useful exercise in terms of seeing how far you've got to go, because having the tactical game plan to begin with, yeah, that's half the battle. Because some teams you've seen play Chelsea, play Man City, they're out of the game at half time because they've been smacked all over the pitch. So we got to that first kind of boss level, I suppose, if you're using computer game parlance, is then taking it up again to that next level. And I think as you've got to hope in terms of when Gerrard has more time in charge, players getting used to his ideas more, new players coming in, I think you'd have to expect go listen to our January transfer window special to see who we think may be coming in, but it's not going to be a situation whereby we've got Steven Gerrard's first choice team by the end of January. It's going to take summer transfer window, probably some transfer windows after that, but it's the first step on, all cliches about having to start a journey somewhere, and that first half did, which brings me nicely full back circle to Tyrone Mings, and does divide opinion. I think in terms of that Lukaku goal with a header, looking at it, from my perspective, it was either one of two things. He didn't see him coming, or he did see him coming and thought that kind of, I'm trying to do a Tyrone Mings shoulder here, would get him out, Lukaku out of the way. The first one, if it is, he just didn't see him coming. I mean, you mentioned in terms of, the great players go and find the space. They go and anticipate where the ball is going to be, those dangerous areas. That takes time, in terms of on the training ground. It takes in terms of being a great player anyway. So great movement against a solid defender is my view. Sometimes you're going to get beat, and I think, Lukaku just, if it was Mings didn't see him coming, just Lukaku did better than him. I'd be less worried if it was that one than if it was the second one, as in he thought that would stop Lukaku, because that's like, I don't think that's stopping Buendia, let alone Lukaku. But I think in terms of, we've had this debate off air in terms of, mentioning the January transfer window, the Gerrard kind of, his length of contract, where Villa are going to be at the end of that, what the expectations of the board are. Obviously, getting rid of Dean Smith means, in our view, the board want to be pushing for Europe. Kind of mid-table isn't good enough for the investment they put in. In terms of what I'd say, everybody does jump on Tyrone Mings when he makes mistakes. I mean, he's in an area of the pitch whereby if you make mistakes, you usually having a goal against you. So those mistakes are naturally going to be highlighted more. What I would say, if Mings is still centre back, along with Konza in 3 years' time, Villa aren't in the Champions League. Villa aren't kind of pushing for that upper echelon of the table. And, I don't think it's I'll get rid of Tyrone Mings tomorrow, kind of as it were, because, you can't, you need players to take you, I was talking about the journey in terms of it takes a while to get to. You need players to take you some of the way. And Mings, he brings a lot kind of non-footballing in terms of leadership, in terms of off the field. So he's not somebody to chuck out immediately. But I do think long term, if we are in Champions League, I don't think he's first choice. He might be in the squad, perhaps, but I don't think he takes us there, which is perhaps controversial for some, perhaps people nodding their heads in agreement to others. But you could have, it's kind of like a more nuanced argument in terms of, just because somebody's not going to be there in 5 years doesn't mean you chuck them out now. Make them a nice turkey sandwich kind of left over with your Christmas, what you got in the back of your fridge. But Do I think he's still centre back at the end of the season? Yeah. Next season, probably. I think he's tied in with the future of Villa in more ways than just whether he's letting Lukaku go past him to concede a second goal.
I think there's only one player in our squad at the moment who you could say is ready for the Champions League, could go into a Champions League team and there wouldn't be any drop in their levels of ability, and that's Emi Martinez. I think Emi Martinez could pretty much walk into any team in the world and he'd do a fantastic job for them and they wouldn't decrease as a team. And that includes teams who have got fantastic goalkeepers already, your Man City's, your Liverpool's, your Paris Saint-Germain's, your Real Madrid's. I think he's our only world-class player. I see what you're saying with Mings. For me, I don't think Mings is so much the problem. Yes, when a defender makes a mistake, you tend to get punished or you tend to get a shot against you. However, if he had a proper ball-winning central midfielder in front of him who was a better player than, say, Nakamba, and Nakamba has done brilliantly. He's been marvellous since Gerrard's come in. Yeah. And if he had maybe more confidence in his left back, and I don't know how much confidence he's got in Matty Targett. I haven't asked him recently. Last time I spoke to him, I said, Ty, would you fancy you go defensive mid? He went, no, not really. What do I know? I think if he had more stability in front of him, a Makaleli type or a Kante type, or even Eric Dyer when he was at Tottenham and it was 4-3-3 that they played, someone who can drop in to allow the central defenders to push wider, then we maybe see a better version of Tyrone Mings. Not that the one that we got is particularly bad or is bad at all. I'm a big fan. I think it's the positions around him that we need to improve first, and we'll see him up his game as well then. If he got a Ben Chilwell at left back next to him and a Bissouma in front of him, and I'm not linking us to either of these except for Bissouma, then
50%.
Yeah, then I think we'd see an even better Tyrone Mings there.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of you're looking at Champions League quality. Yeah, he's not the only one in terms of players who might not necessarily be at that level. Because, well, funnily enough, if you're not in the Champions League or you're not even in Europe, you're not going to have many Champions League players knocking about in terms of your squad. We did have one. He's not there anymore. We won't talk about him. But I agree in terms of if the quality around you goes up, then, you're in that position then whereby it's like, okay, that excuse is that's not there anymore. You're playing with better players, so you step up. And that's at all levels, whatever your objective is, whether it's to stay up, whether it's to win the league.
Yeah.
It's always in terms of you bring the quality up, competition goes up, the players who can hack it go up, and the players who just aren't quite at that level can't. Though, in a very lazy, put you on the spot kind of moment, you mentioned Spurs. Eric Dyer, for example, he's played centre back. He's played kind of what you may call defensive midfield, kind of drop back. Do you think Tyrone Mings would be first choice for Spurs?
Yeah, they do. Look at their centre backs. They've got Joe Rodon, they've got Eric Dyer, and they've got Davinson Sanchez, and they've got Romero from the Argentinian as well. Christian Romero, isn't he? I can't think of any other centre backs that they've got. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he gets in ahead of him. Yeah, a Mings and Dyer partnership, or Mings and someone else and Dyer just in front, probably wouldn't be too bad. If you asked me that a couple of years ago, or when Alderweireld and Vertonghen were there, I'd have laughed and said no, not a snowball's chance in hell of him getting in ahead of them. Could Mings have done a good job alongside Alderweireld when Vertonghen left? Yeah. I think he's a good player. I really do. I've got no problems with Tyrone Mings. I think that he could be one of the ones who is playing for us still when we get into Europe. There's other players who I look to replace first, or other positions that I look to improve on, notably defensive mid and left back. And then, you've got your second goalkeeper Sam Johnston, a name we never mentioned in the transfer window, or maybe we did.
Yeah,
Go
maybe.
and have a listen and see. I'm going to be controversial here, and it's going to get a bit of a what? But I'd probably actually look to replace a Matty Cash before I replace Tyrone Mings. I'm not saying that Matty Cash needs replacing, but I think you've got the bedrock. You've got a good partnership there. Those two centre backs. There's other positions first that need to be improved. Unless, of course, Pau Torres turns round and says, I don't want to play for Villarreal. I want to play for the Real Villa.
Yep.
And he comes to us.
I do agree with you in that there are other areas of the team that are higher up the list to strengthen than centre back. And to mention our transfer special, we talk about a few of those there. So if you haven't listened, go and have a listen. We'll wait for you. I mean, in terms of, it's a joy being in isolation. You haven't really got too much else to do. So don't worry. We'll come. We'll be here when you come back. And if you have already listened to the transfer special, then that means that you are already fully up to date. And you can join us in our next part of this podcast, where we look forward to Brentford. As of time of recording, the game is still due to go on, folks. Hopefully, it will not end up being a washout. But just in case it is, we in terms of the recording, we will tactically either say, we'll see you in a minute, or thanks for listening. Right, moving on, or welcome back, depending on what has happened in the interim in the last 5 seconds since our Chelsea review. We are moving on to 2022. 2021 is over. First game of 2022 at the new Brentford Stadium, which will, in my mind, forever be known as Griffin Park, even though it's not, and I think it may be in a different physical location. But we are in front of the Sky Sports cameras once more to take on Brentford, Sunday, 2nd of January, 2022. There'll be about a month where you write 2021 for everything, but we'll get through that. 2:00 kickoff. First game of the new calendar year. Looking forward to it, Will?
Yeah,
Next
I am.
No further questions.
Yes, no comment. Of course, no. I am looking forward to it. I think that with the players returning, well, the player returning, really more than anything else, being John McGinn, it puts us in with a good chance of getting a positive result against them. You know me, Baz. I'm pretty much always positive. I hardly ever put us to lose. No. I'm right some of the time. I'm not always better right like you when it comes to predicting results.
It's got to be better right.
Oh, mate. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'd be a good game of football. Brentford, okay, haven't had the results that they've wanted recently. They've taken a bit of a tumble down the league. It coincided in some ways with Ivan Toney being out, but I think there was a little bit of a decline before then. We're obviously both fighting for mid-table at the moment. And a win for us puts us back into that top half, hopefully. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about. And especially as Stevie G should also be coming out of isolation by then. It can only add if we have him on the bench.
Well, yeah, you to get your 9 subs, might need to be all hands on deck, in terms of bring your bag of boots in. I'm sure he's still got a few sponsors, even though he stopped playing probably about 5 years ago. But for Brentford, yeah, mid-table at time of recording, they've struggled with the goals recently. But then, in terms of they played Man City at home, it was a similar type of performance, I'd say, to when we played City at home. Defensively solid, got at them. I mean, I think you could make an argument that Brentford probably maybe for over the whole of the game, perhaps were more consistent than Villa were. I mean, we were battered for a lot in the first half and got it together in the second. Could say we looked more dangerous in moments than Brentford did. I mean, I think for Brentford, disappointment, they lost to Brighton on Boxing Day. That was a game they probably would have gone in targeting some results. Also, I think they played Chelsea in the League Cup and lost when Chelsea were probably spending more time moaning about having COVID cases than planning tactically. then yeah, I think after the hot start that they had, I think it was almost inevitable for a newly promoted team to get the harsh realities of the Premier League. They played Watford earlier on in the month. Watford were winning for most of the game, and then I think Brentford won in injury time. That was a big win for Brentford, just keeping the sufficient points away from that bottom four. And, that kind of bottom four looks like a real dogfight kind of down there. And so the further you stay away from that, the better. They've got a good, solid tactical system that, we talked about it when we played them at home earlier on in the season. They know what they're doing. They're good at what they're doing. Play free at the back. Friend of the show, Pontus Jansson, in there. What word can we use here? Our lawyers have told us that we cannot. But, you mentioned Tony up front. It's kind of, you think if they get him firing, then that will alleviate any lingering concerns they might have about looking over their shoulder. I think he was out for a few games with COVID, running theme. I think it was back against Man City. He looked a little rusty, understandably. But, he scored his first Premier League goal against Villa. So I think he'll be looking at this game on Sunday as an opportunity to potentially get back in the scoring charts. But I'd say in terms of talking about Brentford as an opposition, do you think this is a game which, and this is simplifying football to its basics, is this a game whereby we have to be more worried about what Brentford are going to do, or more worried about what we are going to do? In terms of, putting that another way, if we execute our game plan and have our players playing to the levels that they should do, is it a situation whereby we shouldn't really be worrying too much about Brentford? Because if that happens from a Villa perspective, the result will take care of itself. Or is that a bit too optimistic from a Villa part?
I don't think we need to worry about Brentford at all. It's quite a bold statement. They're a decent team. They're a breath of fresh air to the Premier League as well. However, I think that now, with the belief that we've got and the way that we have been playing under Gerrard, we're a different animal to what we were at the start of the season. We had Mings, McGinn, and Ramsey all missing as well, and all three of those probably would have started that game, especially as Ramsey had a barnstormer against Newcastle and came on and did very well in a cameo. Well, second half he got, didn't he, against Watford away. McGinn was one of our best players at that time, and Mings, you're not going to drop your captain unless you're Dean Smith playing against West Ham when you need to win.
So is Mings
available? He's suspended. Yeah, Mings is suspended. Fair play. He is suspended. The only thing I worry about a little bit is is that centre-back partnership then? Who's going to partner Concert, and is there a voice in there? Though, I think we've got enough about the rest of us to be able to beat them, and to beat them comfortably enough to make a statement, if you like. Who is going to partner Ezri Konsa though? Who do you think will be playing at centre back? I know from chatting, as you say, off air to fellow Villa fans, to Dave, Liam, to Russ, from the international Lions and Villains clubs, they tend to think that Courtney Hawes will be coming straight in to partner Ezri Konsa. If you don't think that, leave a comment. I'll respond. It'll be our first comment on the video. Thank you. Do you think Hawes comes straight in?
Yeah.
Would you pick him?
I would, because in terms of who else we got Tuanzebe. There's talk, and this may be speculation, kind of paper talk, about him potentially being recalled by Man United to be sold or sent out on loan to Napoli or another club. If that is true, and those noises have been made, then I think we just need to get that bit of business done. I mean, I'm not sure we have much choice in it if United call him back, depending on what's in that contract. But if there have been talks taking place between Man United and Villa and Tuanzebe about leaving Villa, because he hasn't been getting many minutes under Gerrard, I wouldn't play him. I think it's a game whereby, I mean, let's talk about Corny Hawes in terms of whether the January transfer window is going to be particularly kind to him or not in terms of whether he's still at Villa. But the choice between a player who may be on the way out, kind of through, maybe choice is a strong word, but you can understand the logic of, I'm not playing, I'm out on loan to play, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to play. You can understand that perfectly. And, I wouldn't, from a Villa perspective, if he's not in Gerrard's plans, I wouldn't be keeping hold of him just for the sake of it. I mean, in terms of a flip, if we got Joe Gomez on loan instead, I think Gomez is an upgrade on Twintaby, to be honest. But leaving that fantasy transfer talk aside, between the two, you play Hawes because he's the next one up. And I think in terms of, if you're going to pick a game to bring Courtney Hawes in, I don't think this is a bad game, actually, because I do think it is going to be we were talking in terms of the Chelsea review. You got the movement of Lukaku we mentioned, in terms of that real top quality, next level kind of attributes. I don't want to jump too much on the Brentford, a terrible bandwagon, but it's going to be a different type of challenge against Brentford. And I'd feel more comfortable playing Courtney Hawes against Brentford than I would if we had to play him against Chelsea. Let's put him that way. And I think he can do a solid job with Konza. I mean, Konza, along with Ollie Watkins, going back to a former club, I mean that is going to put some pressure on, because I think there's going to be a welcome awaiting them, shall we say. and so I think, kind of the solidness of Courtney Hawes, I mean, didn't go particularly well the last time we played, but yeah, I think in terms of that choice between Twintaby and Courtney Hawes, definitely for me, if he's fit, Courtney Hawes. And then we look to potentially, if we need another centre back in January, if Twintaby goes, we look to address it then. So that's one of the enforced changes. We've mentioned McGinn a few times in terms of would have been in the team against Chelsea, would have thought if he's fit, we think he plays against Brentford. Who does he, if McGinn's fit and he plays, who does he come in for? Is this a fairly easy question?
No, not at all. I think he could come in for one of two players, really. And those two players are Buendia or Danny Ings for me. I think JJ continues to play and he pushes further forward. He's shown that he can play either as part of that midfield three or as the 2-10s, hasn't he? And he's played very well since he's come back into the team. I suppose the thing is here is, do you want to be creative and play between the lines? Because when Brentford played against us before, they were very much three centre-backs, their two wing-backs who were bombing up and down, and then their midfield three, and then their two strikers. And the only between the lines play that they really had that I can remember was Ivan Toney dropping that bit deeper for them. There wasn't really anybody coming short towards the defenders or the centre-backs pushing forward. So do you get Buendia in there to get creative, to hopefully try his tricks and get his confidence up and get them to pull off? He's got a decent relationship with Danny Ings. He tends to play some great through balls for him. Ings maybe hasn't got the sharpness that he would have had at the start of the season when he was playing matches. Buendia, for example, put a great ball in for Ings against Chelsea, put it onto his left peg. Ings didn't quite get there. But if you want a prolific goal scorer, and granted he hasn't been so prolific this season, though I will continue to bang his drum, then Danny Ings is surely that man that you play up front and you hope can rough up Pontus Jansson a bit. He'll be physical against him. He'll be physical against Azure. He'll be physical against the third centre-back that nobody knows the name of, without being horrible, maybe Sorensen. Don't know.
You can pull that out of the bag.
Yeah, thank you. But if he can do that, and if he can like nullify them and drag them out of the way, not like Hulk Hogan would, then Ollie Watkins can make those runs. JJ can make those runs into the box and hopefully grab some goals. So McGinn comes back in. Yeah, it's just 2-4 out of one of those two. That being said, Morgan Sanson obviously has to start. Morgan Sanson played very well against Chelsea. Don't drop him straight away just because McGinn's back. Get him in the team. getting passing the ball round with McGinn, with Douglas Luiz in that holding midfield space, and take the game to Brentford with 3 very good central midfielders, you know, I think would be a little bit too strong for them.
Does playing McGinn and Sanson in the same midfield necessitate a change in shape if you're then also going to play Luiz and Ramsey? Or do you think that the 4 of them are able to play in the system that Gerrard is looking to implement?
They play the system that he's looking to implement. You've got John McGinn. John McGinn's a hustler-bustler, isn't he? He's the type of midfielder who will drop deep and defend where he needs to, but will also bomb forward and try and score a cracker from the edge of the box, as he's done a couple of times this season. Sanson is very much a central midfielder. He's not a defensive player. He's not an attacking player. He's your central man. He'll stay around that area of the park, and he'll probably try and push forward a little bit where he can do. Douglas Luiz, deep line playmaker, not going to be chucking tackles in like Nakamba does. He'll be reading the play. He'll be reading the positions of the opposition and trying to set the tempo for us. And then JJ, you just put him in that 10. I can see the players when Gerrard gets it right, and I still don't think that Gerrard knows his best team just yet, or he hasn't had it all available as much as he'd like to. I think that if you had those 4, you'd see them interchanging positions a lot. You won't see JJ at defensive mid, to be fair. But Sanson, McGinn and Douglas Luiz could do. Douglas Luiz could push forward into a central midfield position. McGinn could play behind the striker. He does for Scotland. Maybe Sanson could push that little bit further forward, scored a few goals for Marseille in his time. I think they all can work together. Do you throw in another central creative midfielder to play behind Watkins or Ings then in Carney or Bertie? You know, either one of them. And when fit, does Bailey get back into the team? I mean, that's a conversation for another day. But if you're going with those 4, it's about the other 2 that you put in with them in that front 6, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the start of the season, the options were on the wing. Now the options are kind of more in the centre, judging on the formation Gerrard wants to play. For me, I think it's a tricky one in terms of who McGinn comes in for. I mean, I think he has to come in if he's fit. I think if you're looking in terms of...
Because you love him.
I do, but also in terms of the players who've responded the best to Gerrard, whose performances have markedly improved since Gerrard have come in. I think McGinn is near the top of the list.
Yeah.
Being as objective as I can, I think that he's certainly one of, like Matt Targett, to be fair, I put him on that list in terms of players who've responded well to Gerrard. So could spread the love around. So I do think McGinn has to play. Interesting in terms of you've got a few players in that, you could say, more central position, whereby you could say the same thing, and we have said the same thing in terms of they need a run of games to get, confidence up. There's only, mass fans will tell you there's only so many players you can put on the pitch at one time. So now Sanson's fit, something's got to give. And before, to be fair, beforehand, I would have said McGinn comes in for Sanson. Would have been my thought, but having thought about it a bit more, I'll probably bring him in for Buendia, to be honest. And I do agree that we leave. There's going to be some interplay. There's going to be some interchange. I would leave Ramsey at the start in terms of that number 10. Say number 10, just using a Harry Redknapp trick of just running around a bit, getting some energy. As you said, getting between the lines. Because I think we're a quicker, footballing wise, I think we're a quicker team than Brentford. Might not necessarily be in terms of in a 100-yard dash, perhaps. But I also think in terms of now that Gerrard has begun the road of Ings and Watkins in the same team, you got to try and see that through. Whether that's through January, and then if it's not working, have a look at it then. I don't think you can call it off after one game or 2 games. You got to give that an opportunity to develop, see how that goes. So yeah, I'd probably put McGinn in for Buendia, to be honest. And then for me, we talked about Courtney Hawes coming in. Be the same side for me, apart from that, for the Brentford game as it was against Chelsea. Would it be the same for you, or are you looking to make more changes?
I'd probably actually make a few more changes, to be honest with you. Up until you mentioned that Gerrard probably wouldn't want to deter away from the Watkins partnership, if we like. Yep, I did that. Sorry.
Yep. I like what you did there. I'll buy in.
I think you do take Buendia out, and it's a shame for him because Gerrard obviously likes Buendia, likes his creativity. He's very good in tight spaces at moving that ball on. He's got some lovely little flicks and tricks. He just needs the players on the team to know what he's going to do and get onto that same wavelength. But okay, so we start with Watkins and JJ behind Ings and Sanson, McGinn and Douglas Luiz as those 3 midfielders. Matty Cash starts at right back. One, because he has played very, very well. Despite what I mentioned earlier about you'd upgrade him. No, you'd upgrade any player if you could do. Cash starts at right back. Concert starts at centre back. My goalkeeper is my captain in Emi Martinez. I'm going to go a little bit different with these last 2 now. I can understand completely why you'd say Courtney Hawes, but if you listen to the transfer window special, the first leg, then you'll know why I'm not picking Courtney Hawes here. In regards to does Twanzebe come in, if he's going and he's leaving, then no. I put Bogard in, and it's a big shout, but he's a very good player, good 17-year-old. Contra Mings think a lot of him. What you've got to start somewhere. Frame in, he's left-footed as well, naturally left-footed. He can slot in at left back also. Put him there. However, if Twanzebe is staying, I start Twanzebe. And the reason for that is he's got more pace than Hawes. He's good in the air. He's good with the ball at his feet. Gerrard wants defenders who can receive the ball and play it out from the back. We saw against Liverpool and Man City, he was trying to play the ball out from the back, and you're thinking, why on earth are you doing this against these teams when the ball's always coming back? Because when you then do that against Norwich and the likes, it's so much easier. Look at Tyrone Mings dancing around those Norwich defenders.
Yep.
Hopefully it should be a bit easier to do it against Brentford. No disrespect to them. Tony's going to go off on his jollies as well. He's not going to stay up front all game. Do you want Courtney Hawes being pulled out of position? Because Douglas Luiz isn't going to follow him when he drops deeper. And then create a gap alongside Concert? Or do you want someone like Bogard to be there or Twanzebe to be there and say, go on in, clear off. You carry on going up that end of the pitch. And when you get the ball, we'll think about inviting pressure onto you then. If I'm starting Twanzebe, then Target plays alongside him. He has done a lot better recently. I'm still not his biggest fan, but he plays for the Villa. He wears the shirt. He does his best for them. So I support him all the way. However, if Bogard starts, I'll put Ashley Young in alongside him if he's fit enough to play the game, or at least 60 to 75 minutes of it. I think his experience will help Bogard a lot. They played together in friendlies quite a bit, with Bogard on that left side and Young at left back. He'll help him along. I mean, you could even see Ashley Young being given the captaincy with Mings not being in the team potentially. And I'll be completely honest with you. And I know I said this the other day to you. I think if Dean Smith had been there, we could have potentially seen Ashley Young at centre-back. He played centre-back under Conte at Inter Milan in a back 5. I don't think Gerrard will put him there at all. But I would be inclined to put him back in. And then when you've got their right wing back pushing forward, Canos didn't play the other night for them. I'm not sure whether he's injured or suspended or ill and not able to play. Then throw Ashley Young in if he can get forward as well. We know what Ashley Young can do when crossing a football. It may not be as great as 10 years ago, but if you're playing in that formation where you've got Young and Cash constantly high up the pitch. Ashley Young's delivery is probably a bit better than Target's. It's more varied than Target's. Target's deliveries tend to be low across the box. They were great for Barkley and Grealish and Watkins, but Ashley Young floating crosses in and even cutting inside and having a go may be better for us.
I mean, Canos was on the bench against Man City for our Brentford aficionados listening, so he came on with about 20 minutes to go. Be interested to see whether he goes into the starting lineup on Sunday. It's obviously, I think, made an immediate impact in terms of that opening game against Arsenal. Back in the Premier League, because he was at Liverpool as a youngster. I mean, no.
But he's played in a few positions as well, hasn't he? Because he played up front against Leeds and scored against them at Elland Road. So he seems to be a bit of an Ashley Young. Yep. He can play in multiple positions, whether the fans want him to or not.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of players who may not be playing with the fans don't want them to, that's that kind of backline debate. I do agree with you in terms of if it's all paper talk in terms of Twan's AB, and he's here to the end of the season, he's committed to the end of the season, then yeah, I would play him ahead of Hawes. If there's any element in truth to it, I don't. And then Bogard is an interesting one in terms of, there is the old adage, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And I think in terms of, if you play Bogard ahead of Courtney Hawes, then I don't know if you are allowed physically in offices anymore at Villa Park, but Gerrard's getting a knock on the door from Courtney Hawes' agent the day after the game going, what's going on here? If I'm not going to play, then I want out, which may or may not be linked to what we were saying in the Transfer Special podcast, so have listened to that. But I agree, if Bogard plays, then I would play Young for the reasons you said in terms of experience. In terms of, is Bogard the right pick for this game? I mean, you got to. I don't think Gerrard would not play him because he thought he was too young. I mean, I think he's brought players up from the youth team to train with the first team squad to get experience and also to evaluate them. So I think if they've made the right impression, then I can see the logic in throwing them in, because, again, as we said, Brentford, no disrespect, it's not the worst game in the world if you're going to be throwing somebody in for a debut. But it is, it's not going to be a mugs game. I mean, Ivan Toney is going to be, if he's fit, if he's playing, which at time of recording we expect he will be. That's going to be a battle, in terms of, I don't think it's going to be a mugs game in terms of, an education. But
definitely, yeah. I think sorry to interrupt you. I think that if you start Bogard, then it naturally leads on to him starting in the FA Cup then as well against Man United. I probably wouldn't start him in the league because Mings is back by then. But how great for a player like him, or for any young player that isn't Jacob Ramsey, because he starts pretty much every week at the moment. But for a Carney, if Carney got into the starting lineup, for example, or even for Danny Ings and Sanson, who haven't had a run of many games recently, but particularly Bogard, he starts there. You naturally start him against Man United then. And that's two very different oppositions that you're playing against. Man U, we'll talk about it more in the previews for both of those games, but I don't see them starting all of their world beaters in the FA Cup. Ralph Anarak, or whatever his name is, Rangnick, can't remember, Rangnick, he's already said he doesn't like the Carabao Cup, that we should scrap it. Is he going to be thinking the same about the FA Cup? Why not give Bogard a run of games?
Yeah, I do think in terms of that cup game, it's going to be interesting in terms of selection for both teams. And he doesn't like the Carabao Cup. United aren't in it, so it doesn't really. I'm pretty sure they're not in it, so it doesn't really matter whether he likes it or not. But yeah, I mean, those two. If Bogard does play both those games, then yeah, you're certainly having a lot of questions answered in terms of his ability and whether, in the long term, he can make it at Villa, especially in terms of the cup game. As I said, we'll talk about it more in the build-up. There is a bit of a shot to nothing feel in terms of this cup game, in terms of I don't think many people are expecting Villa to go and win. So if you don't win, then you can't really be criticised very much. So why not roll a few dice, throw a few Hail Marys, any other cliches you can throw in there in terms of selection and see where we get to. But bringing it back to Brentford, I think the feeling in terms of we're hoping we won't need too many Hail Marys to get a result. And, we're not playing Southampton, so we can't call St. Mary's. But in terms of the result then for Sunday, and, in terms of the predictions, the cliche is that you are more optimistic than me, which is borne out by the facts in terms of actually going through these results. We'll see whether it's going to be the same again for the game against Brentford on Sunday. I think I know which way you may be going, but what do you think the result's going to be on Sunday?
Well, just to put a bit of perspective onto this for the listeners or for the watchers, whilst you've been in isolation and hopefully you're feeling better, you've gone back through the archives to have a look at all of the scores. And I put out onto the Twitter page the other day that I think you'd said that we'd be 8th at the moment with a +2 goal difference. And I said we'd be 4th with a +6 goal difference.
Yep.
You pointed out to me before we came on air that the only team who would have, was it won or lost?
One.
The only team who'd have won more than us would have been Man City.
I think demonstrating how well Man City have gone in winning the second most games in the league only puts you 4th. That was at the time I did it. This was after the Boxing Day game for Villa, so there's been a few games since then that have taken place. But isolation does a lot of things. Take a screenshot. Those are the predictions so far. But yeah, in terms of Will, after 18 games, 12 victories predicted for Will from 18 games. For me, it was 6. I think 6 wins from 18, which isn't bad. I mean, between us, I only said we'd lose 4. Will said we'd only lose 3. So optimistic in that sense. So New Year, all this talk about new resolutions. Is it going to be the same thing again? Are you giving the fans what they want by predicting a Villa win?
I'm going to give the fans what they want. But I tell you what else is when I'm very disappointed in myself that I have only predicted 1 clean sheet this season. Though, to be fair, we haven't been the best defensively, have we? I'm going to give the score as Brentford 0. Yeah.
Oh, clean sheet.
0. Aston Villa 2. I think we're going to get 2-0 away win. I think it's going to be very reminiscent to Norwich in regards to getting a goal in the first half. I think we'll probably have to weather a bit more of a storm. And that's where Twanzebe Hawes or Bogard will really come into the game. Martinez will make a number of great saves for us. And then Ollie Watkins will grab a late second goal for the Villa. I think we get a 2-0 win. And yeah, I reckon whoever is alongside Conser as well will get the Sky Sports Man of the match. There we go. Even another prediction for you that I'm going to be wrong about.
Well, in terms of that clean sheet, that why not do it with a makeshift back line? That's what I'd say, in terms of getting one. I think this is going to be, it's a really tricky one to call this for me because in the what we'll call the warm-up one that we may or may not record before Christmas that has been lost to the annals of time, I did predict 1-1, which when I did the look back through all the other results, it was the result that I predicted the most during the course of this season. So, I don't know whether it's kind of through the annals of not seeing anybody or speaking to each other for a while, but I've actually become more confident in terms of since we did that. And whether we do new year, new hope, or whether it's going to be the same old, if it goes wrong, then it goes wrong in terms of me predicting a win. I think both teams will score. Let's work up to this slowly. Both teams will score. I think it's going to be a close game. I think there's only going to, if there is a winner, I think there's only going to be one in it. I think Brentford have said they played quite well against Man City last night, but they are struggling with goals. But then we've got our back line problems. As you said, I think Martinez is going to have a very good game in order. There's going to be a few moments where we need him to step up. I'm going to go for a win. I'm going to go 2-1 Villa. And whether this is going to lead into a more optimistic New Year, or whether it'll be shown to be the result of delirium for the illness getting rampant through the bloodstream, we'll tell on Sunday afternoon, kind of after the game's finished about 4:00. But I'm going for a win, 2-1 Villa. That will keep us New Year up the table in terms of maybe an outside shot in Europe. I mean, that is delirium, really. I think kicking in at that stage. But yeah, I have faith in terms of 45 minutes. Chelsea played pretty well. We've had away results against, I think, Palace in particular for me. That is what swung it, because they beat Man City in the run-up, and I thought we were the better team against Palace. And so I'm hoping the same will happen again in front of the Sky cameras, New Year, and I'll be there giving Bogard the man of the match if he plays, just giving the man of the match regardless of what he does, just because of that prediction being right. So both going for a Villa win on Sunday, and whilst that wave of optimism continues to reverberate around, if you're listening to us on our audio platforms, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, or whether you're seeing this visual positivity on your screens if you're watching us on YouTube, I think that is a good time to wrap up, in terms of, New Year, new hope, in terms of nobody wants to start a new year thinking things are going to be terrible. So, we are getting in the spirit. And to help you get into the spirit, check us out on our YouTube page at Talk Trinity, subscribe so you get all the latest updates, all the latest videos, notifications when they're going up. Check out, our transfer window special part 1. You've heard of, kind of 3 wise men. We got 6 on there. I mean, it's literally double, the premium content there. If you don't want to watch us, listen to us on our audio podcast channels. As I mentioned them, we've got Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, some other ones that my co-host will bail out in the outro. But get on those notifications on there as well, so you know when they're coming. I mean, you don't want to miss out. I mean, even if you are a fervent follower of our Twitter page at Talk Trinity, and we pin the latest episodes on there as well, you don't want to miss out. If you're going to school or work and they're all talking about the latest episode and you've missed it, you're just going to look a fool. You're going to have to go and stand in the corner, and not because you haven't just be 2 meters away due to social distancing, but because you can't contribute until you know what we've been saying. And speaking of contributions, our Twitter page, comment, retweet, like, all the other things you can do on Twitter in terms of our polls, our comments, our crazy shenanigans that are there for your viewing pleasure. And before I pass you over to Will for his final thoughts, may I take this opportunity to thank you all for listening or watching, depending on how you are consuming this content. And Happy New Year. And hopefully 2022 is a good one for yourselves and the Villa, starting on Sunday. And me and Will be right, predicting a win.
Yeah. Happy New Year to all of you Villa fans out there, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being on this journey with us. We're very much enjoying doing the podcast. It's the only time me and Baz actually chat nowadays. No, thank you.
Through choice.
Through choice, yeah. When you have to go and talk to him. No, we do really appreciate it. Thank you for all of the followers on Twitter. Thank you for everybody who subscribed to the YouTube channel. I won't ask you to subscribe again because Baz has already done so a couple of times. Deezer, Geezer, Sneezer, wherever you're listening to us, it's also very much appreciated. And as always, cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. And Villa till I die. Up the Villa.